Hello, and welcome back to Conversation Corner, where we talk about building better relationships, overcoming challenges, and improving ourselves in the process. I'm your host, Emily, and with me, as always, is John. Hi, John.
Hi, Emily. Hi, everyone. We've got an important topic today, one that I think will resonate with a lot of listeners: how to deal with toxic siblings. Relationships between siblings can be incredibly close, but when they turn toxic, they can be some of the most emotionally draining and difficult relationships to navigate.
That's right, John. Many people struggle with this issue, and the emotional toll can be significant. What makes sibling relationships unique is that they're often lifelong, which means that dealing with toxic behavior can be especially challenging. But don't worry, today we're going to break down some practical strategies for dealing with toxic siblings, all backed by research. So if you're feeling stuck in a difficult sibling relationship, you're in the right place. Let's start by defining what we mean by a toxic sibling. John, what comes to mind when we talk about toxic behavior in sibling relationships?
Well, Emily, toxic behavior can manifest in a lot of different ways, but it generally refers to actions or patterns that consistently cause harm, emotionally, mentally, or even physically. For example, a toxic sibling might be manipulative, controlling, critical, or even dismissive of your feelings. They might constantly put you down, create drama, or sabotage your personal growth.
Exactly. Toxic siblings can also be very competitive, trying to undermine your achievements, or they might try to manipulate you into doing things their way. Some siblings may be passive-aggressive, using guilt or shame to control the relationship. Others may be outright abusive, either emotionally or physically. Toxicity in a sibling relationship can come in many forms, and it's important to recognize the patterns so you can address them effectively.
Absolutely. And according to research published in the Journal of Family Issues, toxic sibling dynamics often stem from unresolved childhood rivalries or favoritism from parents, which can carry into adulthood. But no matter where it comes from, it's important to acknowledge that these behaviors are unhealthy and need to be addressed.
Let's talk about the impact toxic sibling relationships can have on our emotional and mental health. We often hear about toxic romantic relationships or friendships, but sibling relationships can be just as damaging, especially because they're supposed to be built on trust and shared experiences.
That's so true, Emily. A study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that toxic sibling relationships can lead to increased stress, anxiety, and depression. In fact, researchers found that toxic sibling dynamics are often more difficult to cope with than conflicts with friends or romantic partners, simply because of the familial bond and expectations that come with it.
Yes, and when a sibling is toxic, it can create a lot of guilt and confusion. You may feel like you have to put up with the behavior because they're family, or you may be afraid of causing a rift in the family if you set boundaries. This sense of obligation can make it really difficult to deal with toxic behavior in a healthy way.
Exactly. It's this idea of family loyalty that often traps people in toxic relationships. But here's the thing: research shows that while family relationships are important, your emotional well being should always come first. If a sibling relationship is causing you constant harm or stress, it's crucial to take steps to protect yourself.
Now, before we get into the strategies for dealing with toxic siblings, we wanted to share a real-life story from one of our listeners. Lisa reached out to us to share her experience with her toxic brother, and we thought her story might resonate with a lot of you. Here's a bit of what she wrote to us. Lisa wrote, "I've been struggling with my relationship with my older brother for years. Growing up, he was always competitive and would criticize everything I did. At first, I thought it was normal sibling rivalry, but as we became adults, things only got worse. Every time I share an accomplishment, he finds a way to downplay it or make me feel like it's not good enough. He constantly compares me to others, making me feel small. And when I try to confront him about how his words hurt me, he brushes it off and says I'm being too sensitive. It's gotten to the point where I dread family gatherings because I know he'll find a way to make me feel bad. I feel guilty for wanting to distance myself from him, but it's becoming too exhausting to maintain this relationship."
Wow, that's tough. Thanks to Lisa for being brave enough to share her story. It sounds like her brother's behavior is not only toxic, but deeply damaging to her sense of self-worth.
Yes, it's clear that Lisa's brother has created a dynamic where he's constantly undermining her achievements and emotions, which can have a lasting impact on her confidence. What's really key here is how Lisa mentioned feeling guilty for wanting to distance herself from him. This is such a common feeling when dealing with toxic family members.
Absolutely. Guilt often holds people back from taking steps to protect themselves, but it's important to recognize that Lisa's feelings are valid. Her brother's behavior is not just sibling rivalry, it's toxic because it consistently makes her feel bad about herself. Emily, what do you think would be a good first step for Lisa?
Well, the first thing I'd recommend for Lisa is to start setting some clear boundaries with her brother. She could try telling him directly that his comments are hurtful and that she won't engage in conversations that involve criticism or comparisons. For example, she could say something like, "Oh, I appreciate your opinion, but I'm proud of my accomplishments, and I don't want to compare myself to others." Setting these boundaries may help her take control of the narrative.
That's a great suggestion. Setting boundaries is crucial, but what if her brother refuses to respect those boundaries?
If he continues to dismiss her feelings, Lisa might need to limit her contact with him. It doesn't mean she has to cut him out of her life completely, but she can create some emotional distance. For instance, she could avoid certain conversations or limit how often they interact. Sometimes creating that space can give both parties time to reflect.
Yes, and research from the Journal of Family Psychology supports this approach. It shows that individuals who set clear boundaries and distance themselves from toxic family members often report feeling more empowered and less stressed. If Lisa feels overwhelmed by guilt, she should remind herself that protecting her mental health is just as important as maintaining family relationships.
Exactly. And as we discuss more strategies, Lisa's story is a reminder to all of us that it's okay to prioritize our own well-being, even if it means taking a step back from a sibling.
Let's dive deeper into some strategies for dealing with toxic siblings, starting with what we touched on earlier, setting boundaries.
Yes, boundaries are essential. As we mentioned, Lisa could benefit from setting firm limits on what she's willing to tolerate. The key here is to be clear and assertive without being confrontational. For instance, if your sibling often criticizes you, you can say, "I don't appreciate being spoken to this way. If you can't be respectful, I'll need to end the conversation."
And if setting boundaries doesn't work, the next step is limiting contact. This can be difficult in family situations, but it's important to recognize that you don't owe anyone unlimited access to your time and energy.
Right. Reducing contact doesn't mean you're cutting someone off completely, it just means you're protecting your emotional space. Lisa, for example, could choose to attend fewer family gatherings or engage with her brother less frequently.
Another strategy that works well is not engaging in the drama. Toxic siblings often thrive on creating conflict or making you feel guilty. If you refuse to engage in those dynamics, it can take away their power. For example, if Lisa's brother makes a hurtful comment, she could calmly respond with, "I'm not going to discuss this," and then walk away.
That's a great tip. And let's not forget the importance of seeking support from others. Whether it's talking to a trusted friend, joining a support group, or even seeking professional therapy. Having a support system can help you cope with the emotional toll of a toxic sibling relationship.
Now, while setting boundaries and limiting contact can improve many toxic sibling relationships, there are times when the toxicity is too harmful to continue the relationship. Let's talk about when it might be necessary to cut ties with a sibling.
This is a difficult decision for many people, John, because of the guilt associated with cutting off a family member. But the truth is, sometimes a relationship is so toxic that the best thing you can do for your own mental health is to step away.
That's right. If your sibling is abusive, whether it's emotional, verbal, or physical, or if their behavior is causing you significant distress and you've tried setting boundaries without success, it might be time to consider cutting ties.
A study published in the Journal of Family Psychology found that individuals who cut off contact with toxic family members reported improved mental health, lower levels of anxiety, and greater overall life satisfaction. It's a tough decision, but sometimes it's the healthiest one. Let's do a quick recap of the strategies we've covered for dealing with toxic siblings. First, we talked about setting clear boundaries, communicating your limits, and standing firm on what behaviors you won't tolerate.
We also discussed limiting contact and not engaging in drama. both of which help protect your emotional well being. Additionally, seeking support from friends, therapists, or support groups is crucial when navigating a toxic sibling relationship.
And finally, we talked about when it might be necessary to consider cutting ties, especially in cases of abuse or when the toxicity is severely impacting your mental health. Remember, it's okay to put yourself first.
That's right. Family relationships can be complicated, but your emotional health and well being should always be the top priority. If you're dealing with a toxic sibling, know that you're not alone, and there are steps you can take to protect yourself.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. We hope you found these tips helpful, and if you're struggling with a toxic sibling, remember that it's okay to set boundaries and take care of yourself.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if there's a topic you want us to cover in the future, feel free to reach out.
Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your relationships.